Hi there and welcome to Serious Coin. I'm Kelly Willis Green, and this is the podcast where we have rich conversations about wealth. In my last episode, I spoke to Winston Chesterfield, founder of the Barton Group, a strategic consulting firm focused on wealth and the luxury segment. We talked about the different tiers of wealth and its expression in lifestyle, behavioral traits, and spending habits. We had such a long, interesting conversation, I didn't get to include all of it. So this is a bonus episode. Here, Winston and I are talking about the luxury experience. What is it? And why is it so hard for brands to get right? We also find out the one thing Winston says people are surprised to learn about the wealthy, and we learn more about Winston's own background and how his childhood led him to the work he does today. Listen as Winston describes what the wealthy expect from a luxury experience today.
I think the most important thing about a luxury experience for the ultra-wealthy is really that it has a sense of personality to it, that it doesn't feel like a product, and it feels like it can never happen again. And that is the most important thing to get right about an experience. The ironic thing about if you can give someone an experience where they feel like, I can't repeat that, that's never happen again. You may think that's a bad thing to do as a business, because in businesses, corporates teach themselves you have to give people the same experience over and over again. That's 101 for making products and making experiences in the corporate world. It's ironic, really, but the wealthy who value their time on earth probably more so than lots of other people, because they've got loads of resources and they've got a lowering amount of time in which to use those resources effectively and to enjoy their lives. And they feel like they've won an intergalactic multi-time universe lottery in a way. They've got loads of resources. Most people don't have them. They want to enjoy their lives and have great fun with their wealth, with their family, with their friends, with themselves. It's very important for them to live as long a life as possible, for example. Mm-hmm. So for them, the eradication of time is more acute almost in a way, because there's nothing else being eradicated. Their resources are very, very stable there, and particularly the upper end, they've got more than they could ever spend. So that's never going to be a problem. The problem is always time, which is just running out. And I think because of that, that's why they very much value experiences that can never be repeated. Because if you give them an experience, you feel that it's run of the mill, it's generic, it could be repeated for them, it could be repeated for many other people. The issue with that is they feel their time has been wasted a bit. It's not been very special. Yes, you've been nice. You've given me good service. You've been pleasant. You smiled. But there's been nothing different about this experience that's made me feel that was time well spent. The ironic thing about that something never happening again is that automatically they seem to associate that with that was time very well spent, because it was really a great experience. And that's for sure never going to happen again. And I think some great examples of this are, if you think about the birthday parties they throw their children, they've got more and more extravagant. The parties, when they see their children growing up, when they become 18 years of age, when they become 21 years of age, many very wealthy people are spending millions on these birthday parties. Now that's not, and a lot of the press and the media think this is all, it's grotesque, it's all to show how much money they have. It really isn't. It's not to show how much money they have. Many of the people that do it actually are quite discreet and quite private people. It's not to show how much money they have. They're doing it because that moment is never going to be repeated. They love their child. Their child is turning 18. This is a huge moment. So why don't I hire Beyonce? Why don't we have an amazing fireworks show produced by the guy that does the Paris fireworks every single New Year's Eve? Why don't we have this amazing international chef flown in to do this one-off meal that's never going to happen again? Why don't we have 1,000 of her friends turn up, because she's never going to be 21 ever again? You can see in those moments, that's where that sense of this is never going to repeat it. So I'm really glad to spend on this experience in that way.
I'm thinking of Thoreau's quote of the price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it.
Yeah.
It's that time and effort. I want to talk about the impact of digital on luxury, because I was actually having a conversation with some friends over dinner last week, and our friend pointed out that companies are using technology to offload some of the work onto their customers. I think of, for example, even if you're flying first class, you do your own online check-in. You're in financial services, you retrieve your tax slips from the company portal. You're doing the work How does that square with luxury?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. It doesn't. I mean, essentially, luxury, at the heart of luxury experiences is a sense of stewardship. If you're providing a luxury experience or a luxury service, you are the steward of that experience. You are in control of it, not the customer. You are in control of it as the brand, as the provider. I think, the best exponents of that, if you think about it, probably tailors. Tailors are one of the best examples of things that happen that's still a very analog service. If you take a Savile Row tailor that makes a suit for a very wealthy person, and Huntsman suits can go for £6,000-7,000 for a tailor-made suit. Now, when you go along to Huntsman, the only thing you have to do is really turn up to Huntsman and choose some fabrics. There is nothing that's been delegated to you in terms of any digitization. You're not sent things asking to update your details or anything along those lines. I think the thing that's really disappointing about luxury, if you take, for example, brands like Chanel, if you take brands like Louis Vuitton, when they're asking people to make appointments at the store, asking people to stand in line, you're actually downgrading your brand in doing so. Because what you're saying is, you're saying that there must be lots of aspirational people who are trying to get into the store. And if you treat a potentially high spending client in exactly the same way, and you're told, oh, I'm afraid you're going to have to wait in the queue over there. It's going to be about 10-15 minutes. Or, oh, did you make an appointment? No, I didn't. I just wanted to come in and spend some money. Oh, I'm afraid you have to make an appointment because we're fully booked up. I think that is a very ugly side of what luxury has been doing over the last 10 years, the digitization thing. Because I think some of the digitization can be useful. But I think where digital starts to take control and starts to instruct luxury consumers, that's where it loses any sense of luxury at all. And I think this is a path that luxury has gone down in luxury goods. I think they felt they've had to do it because luxury has become almost like a souvenir category now in some of these brands. You wait in line to go into Chanel to buy a pair of sunglasses, which is what most people are doing when they're queuing to go into Chanel. They're not queuing to go into there to spend loads of money ready to wear. They're just not. Same thing with Louis Vuitton. What are you queuing up here for? Well, most people are not queuing up there to get a 5-piece luggage set. They're queuing to go and get a key holder or a wallet. But if you're a wealthy person who's used to incredible service from hotels you go to, you have your own personal assistants, you are used to getting a chauffeur taking you everywhere. The idea of some brands giving you experience where you have to wait, where you have to book things, where you have to be told no, is not a luxury experience.
This conversation about luxury retail led us to another big spending category, restaurants, and the challenges of snagging a top table at the latest hotspot, including the most talked about restaurant opening in London this year.
A lot of the time, very wealthy people are getting their reservations made by a concierge. So they're usually using a very powerful system where someone is, as soon as the restaurant opens. So a great example is this new restaurant in London called Arlington.
Oh, yes. The old Le Caprice.
It used to be called Le Caprice. And one of the founders of Corbin and King has taken it over and reopened it after it was closed by Richard Caring. And, one of the major issues that people have been having and people have been talking about in London is not being able to get a reservation at Arlington. Now, we can guarantee that one of the reasons why you can't get a reservation at Arlington is because many concierge companies, such as Centurion's program and other individual programs of credit cards, very high-end credit cards, but also private banks, are block booking reservations for very wealthy clients so that they can call up on a Thursday and say, hey, I want to get a reservation at Arlington. Everyone's talking about it. And the concierge, because they block booked that, they can easily get it. Now, what this sometimes results in some cases, and this has definitely been seen, is you've had sometimes not full tables. Sometimes you go into restaurants that are meant to be full, where you've been told it's absolutely chock full, but you go in there and it's not quite full. This happened at Bacchanalia a lot. When Bacchanalia first opened just off north of Berkeley Square, what tended to happen was the first couple of months, I actually went to the during the first week of opening. I actually happened to be there and was told by the maitre d' that the restaurant was completely full. But being there throughout most of the evening, going to the bar and coming back to the restaurant and seeing it, there were some tables that were never occupied throughout that evening. And this is usually a clear sign that it's been block booked by a concierge. The restaurant is happy to do that because the trade-off is If it's our client that's booking it and sending you a client from Centurion, they have a Centurion card. They have a lot of money. So they're going to buy the highest end wine. They're going to buy a lot of food. You can make a lot of money out of them. So the trade-off is if you don't get them turning up, you don't get them turning up. If you do get them turning up, you make a lot of money. Whereas if you put it out on something like OpenTable and you get someone who only buys the house wine, someone who only buys 2 courses, then you're making less money. So this is always the kind of trade-off with new places. But it does rub some people up the wrong way. I mean, if you go back to the points we were talking about this of the White Lotus, the fascination with the ultra wealthy. I mean, there's always a very fine line, I think, amongst the middle classes towards the sort of the elite. I mean, the financially elite. In that, some of it is looked at as an admiration for the businesses they've built, kind of envy for the lives they live and the cars they drive and the holidays they go on, the hotels they stay in, the jewelry they have. Some of it is sort of, I actually rather not have that life. They're good for them, but I'd rather not have it. But when things like this happen, this is where it starts to get a lot more negative, where people actually feel like they are treated as a second-class citizen because a very wealthy person, because they have a great economic capacity, they are more important. And that's where people feel like that's where the unfriendliness, and quite understandably, the unfriendliness towards the ultra wealthy happens. So I think hospitality, and I include hotels in this, if you think about VIP guests and high spending guests, they do tend to be prioritized. If you have economic capacity to spend, they like you a lot more than if you don't. Sometimes people go to ultra high-end hotels and they go maybe once or twice in their lives for a very special occasion. In my view, as a hotel provider of luxury, it's important to make sure that experience that they get is as good as the experience you're providing someone who has deep pockets and has been to 30 of your hotels before and has always stayed in suites. Yes, that person is spending hundreds of thousands a year with you, and that honeymooning couple is only spending $5,000 with you in that 1 year, maybe we never will again. And I can understand the economic difference in that, but it doesn't help brands when they so obviously prioritize economically powerful guests over non-economically powerful guests. And it does happen. People do notice it. They do see it. They get put on rubbish tables. They're not given the upgrade. The person's given the upgrade is the person that can afford the upgrade. All those types of things. It's almost like the old baronies and the desire to pay fealty to the great lords of the manor. It's very old-fashioned, and it makes them feel like they're in some kind of pseudo peasant class who are not worthy of receiving the same treatment, when in fact they should, and they are worthy of it.
I think that's a good point. I want to ask you a question that I'm often asked, because you've studied the wealthy. What is something that you've learned that would be surprising to people?
Surprising to people. I think the very wealthy are very sensitive. I think that surprises a lot of people. I think the caricature of the wealthy is, as we talked before, they do have to have a ruthless streak to them. But I think the wealthy are very sensitive people. They're usually sensitive because they are very aware, they're self-aware, usually, that they are wealthy, and many people are not. Many of them become philanthropists because of that. They start giving money to good causes because of that. They're sensitive to the fact that other people in their family or in their friendship group may not have as much money as they do. And so they have to be careful about being flashy around them. They have to be careful about the kind of gifts that they buy their kids versus their friends' kids. They have to be careful about when they invite them to come to a restaurant, that they don't overwhelm people with the choice of restaurant. If they go to a restaurant, 9 times out of 10, the very wealthy we're talking about, they usually cover everything. They pay for everything because they don't feel good about letting people who are less wealthy than them chip in equally. It just feels weird. If they've got 150 million and their friends have got less than 1 million, it feels very weird to say, well, come on, split it evenly. They feel bad, so they cover it. I think they're very sensitive people. I think in some ways they can be more sensitive than non-wealthy people. And people might think, well, that sounds nonsense. They seem to be very cruel and selfish people. Most of the cases, not. They're just human beings. Another great reason why they become sensitive. They are sensitive to people taking them for a ride. They're sensitive to people conning them. They're sensitive to people asking them for money all the time. And some of these things can make them reclusive. They not necessarily to the Howard Hughes extent, but they can become, very private, very, very shaded individuals, shaded in the sense that they are no longer visible to the public eye. And I think they're sensitive to the fact that, some people may not like them because they're wealthy. I mean, you have characters, for example, like Donald Trump, that couldn't care really what people thought of him. But the majority of very wealthy people can actually be quite thin-skinned and worry about whether people are seeing them as a bad agent, a bad person. Are they doing a wrong thing? Are they doing, are they giving enough? Are they giving to the right causes? Are they doing the right thing by their children? All these things create quite a sensitive character in the very wealthy, and not this kind of hard Citizen Kane kind of Scrooge McDuck character who is just all he cares about is the gold coins and being wealthy, and that's it. It is very curious as to, even though there's a lot more information on the ultra wealthy, there's a lot more interviews with them than there used to be. They live a lot more in the sphere of public life than they ever have before, that so few people actually truly understand them and understand the fact that these are just human beings. And because of their wealth, they do feel privileged. And that can lead them towards this greater sensitivity, not towards lesser sensitivity, which is kind of what people presume.
You do understand them. You've been swimming in these waters for a very long time. I'm interested in your background. I heard one podcast where you mentioned that you were quite young when you became very interested in luxury. Tell me about that.
I mean, I was very fortunate in my background to grow up in a well-provided for household, very well provided for household. And I think both sides of my family, my mother's side, my father's side, have always liked nice things. So there's a genetic thing in there. I mean, my grandfather bought a Bentley. I mean, even though there was, it was quite extravagant for him to buy a Bentley, he bought a Bentley in the 1950s. That's what he did. So he liked nice things. He was an artist, and he liked, aesthetics. My mother that was my mother's side of the family, and she's very much like that herself. She likes beautiful things. She likes nice things. She actually became a designer, textile designer and things. So she's very artistic. And my father also likes nice things. I think he was in the financial services world, and he sort of made his own way and got to know lots of people in his social circle who bought lots of lovely cars, bought artwork, bought lovely houses, bought holiday houses, ski chalets, went on expensive holidays, bought nice watches. So I think there was a lot of exposure to that. And I think because when I was young and at the time when I was growing up, there were like brochures and things sometimes hanging around, either luxury holiday brochures or they were, clothing brochures. There'd be a handbag that, my mother would leave somewhere. Maybe it was a small child, I wouldn't be fascinated by it. My father always bought my mother jewelry all the time, very nice diamonds, sapphires, pearls, lovely jewelry. I think it was just, it was a part of my growing up. Seeing luxury transactions was part of growing up. Where I really got into the category of luxury was in travel. And my parents would have these brochures of elegant resorts or Kuoni or something like that. And I would spend nights in bed, not reading Robinson Crusoe or something like that, but I would be reading travel brochures, reading about these incredible hotels, the Eastern Oriental Express, the Venice Samplon Orient Express. And I think as a child, I always had a fantastical sort of side. But reading brochures was more about the ambition to want to stay in one of these places. When I became about 11, 12 years of age, my parents noticed I started to become quite involved in choosing the hotels we were staying in on family holidays. And I would say, I think we should definitely stay in this one. And I said, well, why? What are you so impressed by? What is it about that one? So we'll look at the room and look at that and look at the location. And I just became very, very keen on it. And I think I just started noticing the luxury difference quite early.
Did your parents talk to you about wealth and how to handle it and what it meant to have it?
I think the thing about my parents that the reason why they are just excellent parents is that they never encouraged the idea that you didn't do something on your own. They never encouraged the idea that you'd be okay. You didn't have to worry about what you did. You'd always be okay. There was never anything like that from them. They were always sort of encouraging of ambition. They were always, pushing the idea that you do your own thing. I think what they really taught so well was teaching the value of money. And so this is where they encouraged, when I got to a certain age, whatever job, that I could get, even though I lived in a very comfortable house and I could come home from college, university and things like that, I could come home and spend time at home. And I didn't necessarily need to go out and earn money because my parents weren't asking me to pay rent whilst I was home from uni or anything like that. But they encouraged me to work. They encouraged jobs. At the time, I think when I was very young about this time, I thought, well, why are we bothering to do it? Why can't I just give some pocket money? Why do we need to do it? And you kind of think that when you're young. Well, I don't understand. I haven't needed to work before this, and you've always given me everything. So why would I need to do it now? But what it did was it really made me see the value of money, because when you earn it yourself and then you spend it yourself, you suddenly have a very different approach towards wealth, towards money, towards income. When you get given something by someone else, irrespective of who that person is, whether that person's a taxpayer, whether it's your extremely wealthy father, when you're just given things, you don't quite value them as much as when you've made them yourself. And I think this is a truism about wealth. Wealth is a very freeing thing. The word I always associate most with wealth is freedom. But I think the other thing about wealth is that's really important, which is why so often you see shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, even with very, very wealthy people, is that not enough people, and I think this is changing with family offices now, but I think not enough people teach their children when they're worth hundreds of millions and they're giving their kids loads of money and they're saying, well, we have to hand it down. There's inheritance tax coming. They'll give their kids, if they're worth hundreds of millions, they might give them $15-20 million each when they're 21 or something like that. Irrespective of the fact that you've got 500 million, that's an insane amount of money to give someone that young. It's insane. It doesn't leave them any incentive for much in life. But the problem with great wealth is it can nullify ambition. It can completely eradicate it from the next generation. And you have to wait until the generation after that for it to come back again. And I think that the most important thing I think about valuing money is that when it's your own, when you've made it yourself, you treat it differently than if you've just been given it. And I think that's really the most valuable lesson my parents gave me.
Then last question, who is someone you admire with respect to how they handle their wealth?
Gosh, that is an interesting question. I suppose it has to be a public figure. I do admire Bernard Arnault. And I'll tell you why. Bernard Arnault is pretty much a self-made man. I mean, he's never from abject poverty or anything like that, but he's pretty much self-made. Certainly the level he's at. It's over $200 billion, I think, at the moment. Bernard Arnault has never used his wealth to become famous. He's never tried to court, some sort of great public opinion of himself with his wealth. He's had a lot of children, and that can be sometimes, for that level of wealth, that can be a very difficult fortune to pass on. I think what Arnault is doing very cleverly is he's bringing his children into the business, and he's not making them immediately CEO of a division or of a brand. I mean, they have 80 odd brands. He's not making them, when they were 20, making them a CEO. Yes, some of them have become leaders over the time, but usually starts them off in the marketing department, or they start off at a lower level than the board level. He's obviously been very careful about this. He's auditioning them. He's introducing them into the family businesses relatively early. He's making them work. The other thing I noticed about the Arnault children is that, whereas children usually of someone of that level of wealth, particularly when you think about some families who have that level of wealth in certain parts of the world, they'll be flying around in the private 777, private 787 Dreamliner. The Arnault children are usually flying, yes, they're flying business class, but they're flying commercial. These are children of some worth over $200 billion. They're flying commercial business class back and forth from New York. They've got their head on their shoulders. Relatively speaking, they've got their head on their shoulders. They don't spend insane amounts of money on themselves. He doesn't spend insane. Yes, he's got some lovely houses. He's got a lovely yacht. Why wouldn't he if he has that level of money? He's got his family, he wants to spend time with them. And I think that's why I admire the way in which he's managed his gargantuan wealth.
Well, that wraps up season 5 of Serious Coin, and I'd like to thank my wonderful guest, Winston Chesterfield of the Barton Group, for a rich conversation. And over the past 5 seasons of Serious Coin, I've heard from so many of you who've enjoyed the topics we've covered and the rich conversations they've prompted in your own lives. And it's my goal to continue with season 6 and beyond. And as you know, with podcasts, listener support is essential. So please, if you're enjoying the content, would you be kind enough to take a moment, give us a 5-star rating, a review, and share it within your own networks? It would really mean a lot. Thanks again for listening to Serious Coin. I'm Kelly Willis Green. Serious Coin is provided for your general interest only, and nothing we discuss should be taken as investment, tax, legal, or other professional advice. Always talk to a licensed professional before you make any financial decisions.